what are those consistent themes that seem to come up over and over again for you specifically? Are there consistent themes where it's like when you're going into companies, you tend to see the same kind of mistakes being made by the leaders in those companies?
Yeah. So first of all, the principles of combat leadership that we talk about: cover, move, simple, prioritize, and execute, and decentralized command. These are the different companies will be good at maybe one of those and not so good at one of the other ones. And it's the same thing with a SEAL platoon. Like some SEAL platoons are really good at cover and move, but no one understands the plan. So it falls apart because their plan is too complicated. And the same thing can happen in a company. Oh, the company works well together, but no one understands what the strategy is, so they fall apart. Or, hey, they know what their priorities are, but one person is trying to do everything themselves. So they're not using decentralized command. So it's a problem. So the same things that you would have in a SEAL platoon, the same problems you could have in a SEAL platoon are the same problems that you can have in a civilian company. And and then of course the root of all problem being the lack of ability to take ownership and the ego getting involved where we're just going to blame other people when things go wrong, which is it definitely is a theme. And if you pull the string on many problems, often it's just an ego problem at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's I had the episode that came out yesterday, and obviously this won't butt up right against it in terms of the timing of releasing the episodes, but was with Simon Sinek, and I asked him, with his experience with leaders and companies, if there were characteristics that he thought leaders need, like what were the like core characteristics that he thought leaders needed to have. And his two were courage and integrity, which were kind of inextricably linked as well. Do you have something like that? And the thing we talked about on there too is that I feel like that is getting disincentivized these days. Like you mentioned, this sort of lack of
When people
accountability.
ask,
Go ahead.
yeah, when people ask me about the characteristic that I think is most important for leadership, it's a real simple answer for me to give. For me, it's humility. So, and the reason that I give that answer is because when I was running Trade At for the last few years, I was in the SEAL teams. When we would fire a SEAL leader, when we'd fire someone from a platoon commander or a platoon chief from a leadership position, we would be firing that SEAL leader not because they didn't know how to shoot their weapon, not because they weren't in good physical condition, not because they didn't understand strategy. Those guys would get fired from those leadership positions because they lacked humility. Because when they lack humility, they don't listen to anyone else. They try and impose their plan on everyone. They don't take any input and they don't take any feedback. They don't take any criticism. And so it's just terrible. And not to mention when someone like that gets overseas, now they don't respect the enemy because they don't think the enemy is as good as they are. And now they get complacent. So it's just problematic. So that's always the thing that I talk about when it comes to the characters. The most important characteristic of a leader is humility.
Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with you on this, and I wanted to bring this up later, but let's talk about it now. And we'll get into this too, but your kids stuff, like your kids books here, which I read through, and this first one, there's a portion of it where you're sort of bringing up the different codes from Viking code and like knighthood and the Ranger Creed and right, all of that kind of stuff. And what's interesting about them is not all of them have that in there. In fact, it's only really like when I looked at it, like the SEAL ethos, and then when this kid comes up with his own code, right at the end, it's got in there, be humble, and I think that that's so critical. And I'm curious why. Just your thoughts on that too. Like why you think it isn't in some of those. Not to say that they're wrong, but why that's not in there. And again, getting back to kind of the previous question here, do you feel like we're sort of going in the wrong direction in that regard with leaders these days? Because I see that a lot, I think, in the public landscape, like it's being disincentivized to act that way. It's almost incentivized to not have integrity and not have courage and almost, to your point, blame everybody else. Do you think that's true?
I don't know if I necessarily see that. I know that people will tag me in social media when a leader either takes ownership or doesn't take ownership. And, they'll tag me and say, this is extreme ownership. Great job, this individual. Maybe it's a sports team coach or it's a leader of some kind of business. And so I'll see people will mention when that happens, and then they'll mention when someone doesn't take ownership and blames other people, they'll kind of mention that as well. So I see a little bit of both, but I don't think it's any kind of I think that's probably been like that for a long time. That people's natural instincts. And, a lot of what we teach is to counter the natural human instincts that we have. In fact, just about everything that we teach is to counter the natural instincts that most people have. And, for instance, cover and move. Why do we need to teach cover and move? Well, it's because our natural instinct is to look out for ourselves and not
Yeah.
take care of the rest of the team. Why do we have to teach simple? Well, it's because people have a tendency to make things too complicated. Why do we have to teach prioritize and execute? Well, it's because people have a tendency to try to do too many things at the same time or to focus on the wrong things. Why do we have to teach decentralized command? Well, it's because most people want to control everything and make every decision. And why do we have to teach extreme ownership? Well, it's because most people want to blame other people. It's their natural instinct. When you walk into the kitchen and your 5-year-old kid is sitting there at the table and there's milk spilled and you ask him what happened, he points in the milk and says the milk spilled. He didn't do it. That's a natural instinct, is to blame the milk, an inanimate object. So I think that these different types of leaders, good leaders and bad leaders, have been around for a long time. And I think that maybe they get highlighted more or less in certain time periods, but I think I think there's lots of incentive to take ownership, and I see it a lot with a lot of leaders right now.
Yeah.